teddy bear shelf. It's from spring 2003 Scroll Saw Workshop. So it goes back. You can tell I keep patterns a long time. I've got patterns back into the, I think into the 80s. There might even be something into the 70s, but for sure into the 80s. Anyway, I like this one, and I thought, yeah, that'll make a nice little thing for a child's room. So, and then I took the patterns I traced. One is for teddy bear for each side. I made that one out of 1/8 inch plywood, and the other is for the back, and I made that also out of 1/8 inch plywood. And so now I've got two patterns. Calls for 1/2 inch thick material. The back is 7 1/4 by 15. Set a piece a little larger than that. Both edges are rough. I'll rip one of the edges straight, and then I'll put the pattern on top, and that will be good. And then I have another piece here. I ripped it to, cross cut about 31 inches because I need one teddy bear on each side, and the top shelf, which is 16 inches long. A table saw isn't a necessity, but it comes in handy for rough stock preparation. I started with a piece about 8 3/4 wide, then ripped it down to 8 1/2 so it would have one smooth edge. The other edge is curved and will be cut on the scroll saw. I used a feather board to keep the wood tight against the fence. I donned my hearing protection, used a push stick to run the board through the blade, then waited for it to stop before removing the workpiece and scrap. Now the wood is ready for me to trace the pattern on top. Okay, that's going to be my back. With all the pieces rough cut, I could move on to tracing the patterns onto the wood. These patterns were simple enough to use this method, but for more complicated patterns, I have to choose the best method for transferring the pattern to the wood. I have a video on 9 ways to attach patterns to wood, which I'll link in case you want to check out some of the other ways this can be done. I cut this board long enough that I was able to fit one teddy bear at each end. In addition to the bottom, there are some flat spots on the top and back of the bear where the shelf top and back will be mounted. When I flipped the board around to trace the second bear shape, I noticed the end had a small defect, so I trimmed it off with my radial arm saw. Luckily, the piece was long enough that I had room to do this. The pattern for the back is a little more difficult to trace with the bear and heart shapes. I was still able to get the level of detail I needed, otherwise I would have resorted to making a copy of the pattern and attach it to the wood. It's time to start cutting, and I decided to start with the bears for each end of the shelf, as they were the easiest part of the cut. These are made from 1/2 inch thick red oak, as I already mentioned. In my experience, this thickness is on the borderline between choosing a number 5 or a number 7 blade. Since the pattern is simple, I opted for the number 7 blade because it will cut faster. If you want to learn more about choosing the right size blade for each task, I'll leave a link to my video on that subject. I usually attach paper patterns to the wood and don't trace them often, so I didn't realize until I watched this video during the editing process that it's difficult to see the penciled cut lines on the video. For that reason, I won't show much of the cutting process. I drilled pilot holes to thread the blade through to make the inside cuts for the hearts and bears on the back piece of the shelf. There are no difficult cuts for any of these, so even a beginner on the scroll saw should be able to make them. I turned the light off from my lighted magnifier, and that seemed to make visibility better. The bears and hearts are all curves with no sharp points or angles to negotiate, so I don't have any tips to pass along on how to do this part of the project. There aren't a large number of cuts to make either, so this is easily a weekend project. All the parts are cut and I sanded all but the top, so it's time for assembly. One bear goes on each side, spaced 1 inch in from the edge of the back panel. There are small flat spots on the top and back of the bears to provide contact points for gluing. I'm going to attach the bears to the back first, then I'll let the glue dry before I add the top. I set the top against the sides to make sure they were positioned correctly, then set it aside. I need to put a round over or perhaps a decorative edge on the top and give it a final sanding before it's ready anyway. There is plenty of area to add glue for the last part of the assembly. On the top of the hearts, the top of the bear's heads, and all along the top of the shelf back. I applied the glue from the bottle, then used my finger to spread it around. I grabbed some F-clamps off their storage rack and added one to the middle of each side, plus a couple to the back. Once the glue dries, I'll take the shelf unit to my paint room and apply a polyurethane finish. One of the lessons learned from this project is that there is a reason I cut ideas from magazines and saved them for over 20 years. This is going to make a great decoration for some child's room. If you can't find that magazine in a library somewhere, you can still find inspiration from the idea of making your own patterns for the sides and back. This project was not difficult, and it's something even a beginning woodworker could put together in a weekend. Let me know what you think in the comments and check the screen for a suggestion for the next video you may want to watch.